Video game perfection. That's a rare thing. A video game that's completely flawless, from the moment you hit the start button right up to when you hold down X to skip the credits. Very rare indeed. Like an albino Bigfoot sighting in the spring. But just like albino Bigfoot, it does exist. And when you find it, it's awesome. Again, like albino Bigfoot. So then, let me tell you about the video games that are absolutely perfect, unforgettable, genre-defining masterpieces with infinite playabilism and brimming with funfulness. Now that's what I'm speaking about. Perfect video games where you wouldn't change nothing. I've got 15 of them, 15 perfect games. Let's go. First up, Tetris. Tetris is the perfect example of a perfect game. A puzzle game for the ages. It is and always will be genius. Of course, you already knows it. Those shapes made up of 4 blocks known as tetrominos that fall randomly into your tunnel. But don't let them overflow and game over your ass. Instead, arrange them and slot them together in neat lines to clear them and banish them to shape oblivion, known as block colour, where they'll face judgment and eternal rotation. Yeah, I made that last bit up. Because Tetris has no story. Tetris needs no story. And that's part of what makes Tetris perfect. It's purity. Because there's no excess, no flab, it's all just pure game. And that core game is perfect. Perfect in its concept and execution. And yeah, it's been embellished over the years with some excellent versions like the mesmerising Tetris effect, where blocks drop to the beat, or the Battle Royale style Tetris 99, where 99 players compete against one another. I've actually won a few rounds of that, by the way, just so you know. And anyone can play Tetris and understand it immediately, and get hooked on it immediately too, because it somehow taps into your brain on a primordial level, like trepanning. So much so that it even has its own psychological state named after it, where prolonged gameplay can result in players seeing tetrominos in their periphery, and involuntarily start arranging their cereal boxes in a pleasing way. That's the brilliant power of Tetris's gameplay. I mean, what other game can have such an impact on players that it can mess with their minds and warp their reality in such a way? Grand Theft Auto 5. Everyone's favourite satirical crime-based action-adventure sandbox game set in America. You don't become the biggest selling game of all time, second only to Minecraft, with anything less than perfection. Everything about this game is dope as fudge. You've got your epic story, where you play as not one but 3 iconic characters. Yee-ass haircut Franklin, Tony Soprano Michael, and angry My Name is Earl Trevor. And you've got the elaborate heist missions where you have to plan and pull off big scores, daring raids, or some other crazy gangster shiz. There's some of the most memorable video game missions ever around involving guns. And then in addition, you've got a whole heap of awesome crap to do on the side. Assassination contracts, street races, parachute jumps, golf, and helping out strangers in need.
Would you give me a ride home?
Or you can just sack it all off and run around the city going mental. Because this game has got more guns than John Wick, or an average American, and more cars than a roundabout in India at rush hour. And a massive city of astonishing scope and detail. Put all those things together and you've got endless fun. There are few games that can match the depth and diversity of Los Santos and Blaine County. You can visit downtown, have a little mosey round the hood, or cruise the wealthy Vinewood Hills. Or you can get out to the country and trek through forests, deserts and mountains. And everywhere is alive with activity. There's a whole menagerie of varmints like sheep, dogs and cats, both friendly and unfriendly, sharks, just unfriendly, and then there's an absolute fartload of pedestrians, all fully voiced and who'll give you the business if you get up in their faces. It's a perfect video game world of unequaled scope where you can live out your ultimate power fantasy, like kicking over a bin or taking a selfie with a homeless, or being a bus driver for a day. Not many games can let you do all that. Perfect. Super Mario World. If the original Super Mario Bros. Created the template for 2D platforming, then Super Mario Bros. 3 perfected it. So then how did Super Mario World improve on something that was already perfect? That's right, it added a rideable dinosaur. Which is a no-brainer really in hindsight, isn't it? Just think of all the things that could be made better by adding someone riding a dinosaur. Little Women, Schindler's List, The Bible, Brokeback Mountain, loads of stuff. So then, On top of Nintendo's absolute nailing of Mario's mobility, where running and jumping the little mustachioed man through world's levels feels incredibly pleasing to the thumbs and indeed the head senses, they also added Yoshi. Yoshi's the best. He's my favourite. Oh, never mind, he served me well. Yes, Yoshi is a trusty steed and a formidable ally. He'll munch down on a Koopa with his crazy tongue action, spit mad fireballs, and stomp helmet-wearing jocks into the dirt where they belong. But you might also say Yoshi's primary function is to act as a shield or to sacrifice himself to give you a leg up. Because the star of the show is still Mario himself, who handles like a dream. His pace, weight, and inertia are as finely tuned as an excellent Italian sports horse. Holding the dash button to get a lick on and fly through levels is a delight. Or to grab a cape and literally fly through them is so much fun it feels like cheating. Which is handy because World has some pretty flipping tricky stages up in air. There's swinging platforms, clickety conveyors, and Bowser's big spiky lengths of hard steel. But the difficulty is so perfectly balanced, there's challenge enough for everyone. Furthermore, the levels are wonderfully varied and vibrant, chock-a-block with shortcuts and secret exits. Super Mario World is perfect, and probably one of the most recognisable 2D Marios. With Dino Land being the most iconic overworld in video games ever, facts, and the soundtrack being the catchiest original score with a Calypso styly ever as well too, also facts. And featuring the most famous, popular, beloved video game character of all time besides Leon Kennedy at the top of his game in his classic glory days. Resident Evil 4. Speaking of Leon Kennedy, it's Sexy Curtains Man himself, star of the most perfectest action horror game of all time. Which Resident Evil 4 are we speaking about though, I hear you ask? Original or remake? To which my response would be, yes, original, remake. I can't decide, don't know, it's up to you. I can also hear you saying, what about the story? By which I think you mean, it's ludicrous. To which I'd reply, cool it, okay? And embrace the schlock, yeah? Because you're missing the point.
Rain or shine, you're going down.
The cheesy telenovela plot is grade A B-movie ham, and that's the perfect thread that ties together the explosively violent action and the ominous and foreboding horror atmosphere. Resident Evil 4 is the perfect harmony of guns and scary, and superbly blends suspense with intense combat. Each area of the accursed Spanish village is simultaneously a nightmarish cinematic backdrop and also a perfectly designed combat arena. No matter how tooled up you are, stuffing Leon's attaché case with shooters, it's still easy to get overwhelmed by the gangs of cursed Ganados flanking you and pressuring you to turn and run and hurdle a fence or scale a ladder to create some space and catch your breath. Its over-the-shoulder viewpoint and third-person gunplay is still some of the best in video games. And when the game isn't throwing angry chainsaw burlap ballsacks at you, it's slowing things down and has you creeping along dark corridors or through rainy cemeteries, while the macabre atmosphere sucks you in, puts you on edge, and creeps you out, in that order. Resident Evil 4 is still a landmark and one of the greatest video games of all time.
Hasta luego.
The Last of Us Parts 1 and 2. So you remember how I just said Resident Evil 4 was the most perfectest action horror game of all time? Well, these are the other most perfectest action horror games of all time. But The Last of Us is more perfecter because unlike Resident Evil 4, it's got incredible story chops. Do you remember that amazing / dreadful / hilarious scene from Devil May Cry? Do you know the one I mean?
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Yeah, that one. Well, every other video game with a story feels like that in comparison to The Last of Us. The Last of Us raises the bar for quality of narratives, dialogue, and performance in video games so high that it makes other games with stories feel like school plays. They're the most emotionally intense games ever created. I've never said please don't make me do this to a video game before, either out loud or with such frequency as I did while playing the Last of Us games, which I think by itself alone is definitely worthy of long and careful consideration. And while there's many a post-apocalyptic landscape in video games, there's none so detailed, so thoughtfully crafted and utterly captivating as the world without us that's depicted here in The Last of Us Parts 1 and 2. The thoughtful and captivating creations also extends to some of the most believable and grounded characters in all of games too. Chuck in some fraught combat encounters and pulse racing stealth sequences with some of the most hideously conceived monsters since Geiger's Aliens, and hey, you got yourself a masterpiece there, Jimmy. Journey. If I was to sum up Journey in just one word, it would be evocative, transient, sand. Journey. Actually, Journey's a pretty good one. I can see why they called it that. It tells you a lot of what you need to know about the game, because it is indeed about a literal journey, crossing the desert and traversing old ruins to reach the summit of a mountain. But beyond the physical journey, there's a metaphorical one that plays out. The hero's journey, the 3-act monomyth. Setting out, the call to adventure, joy and discovery, and then darkness, the guardian's threshold, and then finally revelation, death and rebirth. But really for me, it's the emotional journey that you go on in this game. It's an experience that really grabs you by the feels. Although mechanically it's a video game, it's very much a sensory experience, kind of like a ballet or a tone poem or something like that. It's very stirring and I get a very visceral feeling while playing, similar to being a kid and watching Fantasia or Raymond Briggs's The Snowman. I don't know how it does it really, how it makes such a strong connection with the player. It could be the big floaty jump that makes you feel like you're flying, or joyfully gliding down the side of a sand dune, your big scarf trailing behind you awesomely. It could be the pristine appearance of the sand, or the fricking gorgeous colour palette. Most likely it's something to do with Austin Wintory's epic soundtrack. Or it could be how incredibly pure and simple the game is, similar to Tetris in how anyone can just pick it up and play it. Perhaps it's the genius idea of adding a subtle online component where you share the whole experience with some anonymous companion. It's probably the combination of all these things. But in any case, there aren't many other games that so strongly and evocatively convey to the player the sense of what it means to be alive. And that is art, if there ever was a good lord. And while we're talking about video games as art, Shadow of the Colossus. Like Journey, Shadow of the Colossus is a game with strong emotional themes. Themes of isolation and loss resonate wistfully and with a slight tinge of mournful. And like Journey, Shadow of the Colossus is pared back to just simple gameplay mechanics and a richly cinematic world. It's just running and climbing and occasionally shooting the arse off a lizard and eating it to boost your stamina. But that's like the only gamey thing in there. The rest of the experience feels very somberly restrained. There's no music as you explore, there's no side characters really, and there's barely any dialogue. But there is just enough story to intrigue the crap out of you. A stolen sword, a dead girl, and a trusty steed. These are your only companions in the forbidden land where you have travelled to resurrect aforementioned dead girl. But in order to do so, you must defeat the 16 Colossi. You've got Mahusive Mike, Strongbeard the Crusher, Stephen, and 13 others. And each one is like its own stage, puzzle and boss fight rolled into one. These giant enemies inspire awe, fear and running away, and some might say guilt. Because of their clever design, these beasts display a vulnerability and occasionally an unwillingness to fight. Didn't stop me from slaying their massive asses to death though. You know, I'd do anything to get what's-her-face back. Yeah, her. Actually, in all seriousness, the doing it for the girl bit is part of the genius of this video game. Because of the nature of video games, as a player you find yourself complicit in carrying out whatever task the game wants you to. Reach the goal, rescue the princess, save the life of Pelamar, what have you, and you don't really stop and question it because it's just what the game's about, it's what you do. That's the arrangement. And that player and game arrangement plays out perfectly here in the final moments of Shadow of the Colossus, when an emotional rollercoaster ensues, fueled almost entirely by your direct input. Sudden malicious compliance is followed by a panicked and hopeless struggle in probably one of the coolest twists in video games. But besides that, it was the quiet exploration that moved me the most. The Forbidden Peninsula might feel pleasant if perhaps you weren't wandering it alone in search of 16 monsters to have a tear-up with, but as it is, it's eerily desolate and feels foreboding. It's so solitary and painfully lonely that it gives you a great sense of isolation. It's like being on a desert island, or a bit like when you were a kid and you'd mistakenly get left at a roadside services overnight, so you just curl up and try and sleep under a picnic table. I mean, that's just an example, but the Forbidden Lands are sublime, and they've been created to convey a real sense of place, and they help make Shadow of the Colossus a beautiful, perfect experience that's hard to forget. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. There are 96 courses in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. 96! That's an insane caboodle. I remember thinking I'd never tire of this game when there was only 32 tracks. It would never get old. And at this rate, I don't think it will. It'll be around forever. And at the end of time, it will just be Bear Grylls and the cockroaches playing battle mode. As well it should be. Because it's just so good, isn't it? I think it's the most fun video game with Mario in the title. And that's saying something. And if there were guns in it, I think it would be the best game with a gun in it too. That's how good it is. Because there's lots of games with guns in. Not Mario Kart 8 though. Mario Kart 8 is wholesome. Except Luigi's Death Stare. It's bright, sunny and colourful. And it plays like a dream. There's a weightiness to the karts, drifting feels tight and responsive, and there's a great sense of speed. Even now, hitting those dash panels and getting a boost still sends a tiny bit of endorphins to my balls. And you've got the glorious cacophony of sound effects and the swinging soundtrack with songs so catchy they're always bouncing around inside my head, just like that bit of broken power saw blade. It's mayhem, chaos, and it's all perfectly packaged up into one of the best racing games ever. It's like party time at a Nintendo video game nostalgia museum on go-karts. And we're all invited. What are we waiting for? Let's go! Me first. Single file. No carts, a-hole. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So now we inevitably get to The Legend of Zelda. And at this stage you might well be saying, yeah, what about Tears of the Kingdom? And that is a valid interjection and I enjoyed listening to it, thank you. But you see, prior to its release in 2023, I might have said Breath of the Wild was a perfect video game. And then Tears of the Kingdom came along and showed us how much further it could be improved. And so I think it's too soon to say. Tears of the Kingdom is so big and sprawling it's hard to quantify, and I haven't fully digested it yet. It might well be perfect though. I mean, yeah, let's just go ahead and say it is. Here we go, look. 16 games that are absolutely perfect. Tears of the Kingdom. Right, Ocarina of Time. A perfect video game. And at this stage you might well be saying, yeah, what about the Water Temple? And yes, the Water Temple is indeed a poo in the ointment. It's confusing as all hell and it's an unprecedented spike in difficulty. You had to keep raising and lowering the water level, and it was a willy ache having to repeatedly go into your inventory menu and put on the iron boots. Yeah, it's not my fondest memory of the game, and that's for cocksure. Here's what Zelda director Eiji Aonuma had to say about it. The Water Temple in the Ocarina of Time was notorious for being very tough to conquer, and I am most sorry that it was not easy for you. But, you know, come on, don't be such a pussy. Okay, he did not say that. That was just me having a joke. Don't send the lawyers round, Nintendo, please. Look, that's not even a picture of Aonuma, it's just a picture of a Japanese guy I got off Unsplash and drew some glasses on. Alright. Anywho, they did actually go some way to improving the Water Temple with the 3D remaster on 3DS by colour coding the different areas where you can change the water level and switching the iron boots to an item so you can quickly slip them on and off without having to go into the menu. So look, let's amend that. The perfect game is specifically Ocarina of Time 3D. There you go. Right, Ocarina of Time 3D. So, stepping out into the vast expanse of Ocarina's Hyrule today doesn't feel as vast and as expansive as it once did, but it's still one of the great video game adventures of all time, and it still holds so much charm and wonder. The world is a toy box of secrets and mysteries with innumerable puzzles, from the very small ones like what do these frogs want, to the very large ones like what does this large dude want. And then there's the perfectly crafted dungeons, filled with locked doors, switches, keys, rotating corridors, and all manner of big brain tasks for you to get stuck on. And you get 2 of these worlds for the price of 1. The young exuberance of the present, and then the bleak, dark, grown-up future. This game is a joy, and in the wake of breathy Tears of the Wild Kingdom's sprawling, endless freedom, there's something to say about Ocarina's compact and more linear design. It feels focused and tight, and it's as absorbing as ever. Portal 2. So if you thought Zelda had the cleverest puzzles, well, you can go straight to hell, because Portal 2 the best puzzles. When the original Portal was first released, people got a taste of a game with a first-person perspective where you didn't kill any demons or Nazis, and it was quite a shock. But luckily, it was the most creative and cleverly designed piece of interactive entertainment ever, so that helped. And then Portal 2 took all that good stuff and ran with it for a full-blown sequel, with even more insanely clever, brain-breaking physics-based puzzles, all thanks to the time-space warping, quantum tunnelling portal gun, one of the absolute coolest gizmos in video games. Portal 2 added some high-profile actors to lend their voices to it. Stephen Merchant's portrayal of Wheatley to this day is the best thing he's done beside introducing the world to Carl Pilkington, and J.K. Simmons as the voice of Cave Johnson is his best work, besides Spider-Man and maybe that film where he picks on the drummer. But the star of the show is Ellen McLean, and her incredibly sinister yet incredibly funny performance as the robotic oppressor GLaDOS. So, to summarise, this game is an absolute masterclass in puzzle design, environmental storytelling and narrative, and certainly to my mind, the best game with 2 in the title. Hold that thought. Street Fighter 2. A game so good they released it 100 times. You've got your turbos, your hyper fighting, your champion edition, your super new challengers. I mean, you could argue with so many revisions, Street Fighter 2 is hardly perfect, but remember, this was before the days of the downloadable balance patch. And also, the differences between these versions are pretty subtle. A bit of a speed increase, improved sound effects, new special moves. I mean, there is some subtle yet deeply transformative additions that big boy players appreciated, but for casuals like me, it was still all about those fundamentals. Because the one thing every version of Street Fighter 2 has is that groundbreaking gameplay and pioneering fighting formula, TM. Because you only have to look at Street Fighter 3, 4, 5 and 6, and every other fighting game to be honest, to see they've all hung their boxing gloves and black belts on the framework of Street Fighter 2. And yeah, over time there have been significant upgrades in the presentation of Hadoukens, Shoryukens, Tatsumaki Senpyu kits, but all those moves use the same button combinations as they did in Street Fighter 2, because those core punches and kicks, those fundamental arse whoops, can all be attributed to what Capcom created with Street Fighter 2. But to hell with historical significance, we don't need it, because Street Fighter 2 is still perfect today. Attacks feel satisfying, punches and kicks impact with meaty sound effects. Yoko Shimomura's blistering soundtrack comes hard into your ears, and you've got probably the most iconic roster of characters in a video game ever, all with their hairdos and bulging muscles. But really, the genius of Street Fighter 2 lies in its simplicity and the clarity of its design. Again, like Tetris, I think anyone, even people who don't play video games, could pick up and play Street Fighter 2. 2 fighters, 2 health bars, press the buttons to hurt one another, have at it. I reckon you could give a controller each to 2 grannies and they'd have a good time. It wouldn't be any good, but it doesn't matter, because that's the beauty of Street Fighter 2. It can be enjoyed by players of any skill level, and that makes it the perfect beat-em-up. That said, I haven't played 6 yet. Is it good? I heard it's good. Or Tekken 8? Oh, cool, I bet that's good too. Cool, perfect. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Like The Last of Us, I'm bundling Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 together as there's not a discernible difference in quality that I'm aware of. I find it hard to separate the pair in my mind. Galaxy 2 did add a rideable dinosaur though, so there is that I suppose. But anyway, both games are just effing delightful. With Galaxy, Nintendo took 3D Mario to the next level by allowing Mario to move in 3D, but like more. Thanks to Galaxy's gravity mechanics, Mario can run underneath, behind, round about and up inside, and of course, on top of the spherical mini-planet platforms of this outer space themed adventure. These games are just overflowing with creativity. The level design is ingenious. Each level is so unique and it often features a new idea or mechanic. Sometimes it's a concept so brilliant that you could imagine an indie developer building an entire game around it. But Nintendo just happily ties them to a single stage in Galaxy before moving on to the next amazing level and another new idea. It's just audacious video game making. And both games receive that beautiful sheen of Nintendo polish. It's the sensory feedback you get from Galaxy that I love the most. The tinkle of star bits, the baseball bat thwack you hear when you snipe one of those little bling wads. And I'm not one for motion control wand waggling, but the feeling of flicking the Wiimote and catapulting Mario out of a sling star and sending him soaring through space was just mwah, deaf kids. This is just the utter pinnacle of 3D Mario adventures. Its creativity, its orchestral soundtrack, and the fun times while playing a video game factor are yet to be equalled. And at this stage you might well be saying, "Hey, what about Super Mario Odyssey?" And yes, well, Odyssey is almost a perfect game, but it's those Broodals. They're about as fun as a fart in the eye, and they make Mario Odyssey slightly less than perfect. Oh, alright, fine. 17 games that are perfect. Super Mario Odyssey. Bloodborne. Of all the Soulsborne Vanias in all the land, This one is absolutely perfect. The nightmare streets of a diseased gothic city with werewolves and added cosmic horror to taste. That's the setting of one of the most brutal action horror games ever. Oh wait, this is the most perfectest action horror game. Anyway, in a plagued town where the sick are become like beasts, it's up to you, the hunter, to cleanse the streets. In this action RPG, From Software does away with the shield and any silly notion you might have about defending yourself from the nightmare beasts that inhabit the decaying town of Yharnam. Merciless aggression is the name of the game here. Attacking is your only friend now, boy. Oh, and Eileen, she's your friend too. But the closest thing you'll find to a shield is a blast from your shotgun. Though not powerful enough to slay enemies, it is enough to run interference and, if properly timed, to stagger your opponent and create a window for an arse-tearing critical hit. Full frontal assault is so encouraged that you can actually steal lost health back by counterattacking immediately after taking a hit. Such is the nature of Bloodborne's deadly dance. But it's not all just a big savage dust-up with beastmen. No. There's a lot going on in the Bloodborne mythos. You gotta find the source of the old blood or something. I don't know. The subtle narrative is too cryptic for my smooth monkey brain to comprehend, but it does make for one of the most fascinating video game worlds ever. The story is gleaned at best, scattered memories, fragments of the past, strange objects, a lot of strange objects, and there's personal stories to be told, from survivors taking refuge or heard from frightened voices behind locked doors. And amongst all the blood-frenzied madness, there's a sadness. It's that winning combination of madness and sadness. And for that reason, I think, of all of From Software's dark fantasy games, it's Bloodborne that lingers longest in the memory. It's the blood-splattering lightning-fast combat that gets your heart racing in the moment, but it's Yharnam's wretched population that haunts you for a long time after you switch off the game. Yeah, perfect. Oh, no, wait. It doesn't run at 60 frames per second, does it? Forgot about that. Okay, forget it. Right, we're back to 16, 17, I can't remember. Anyway, whew. Right, those were my idea of some of the pretty perfect video games out there. You might have other ideas, which is cool. Please do let me know what your perfect video games are in the comments below. And yeah, I'll be honest with you, I haven't played every video game, so please cut me some slack because I might have overlooked some that are perfect, because there is quite a few of them out there. Unlike Albino Bigfoot. Like and subscribe.